We've seen the left and right functions, which are great for text string manipulation for extracting parts of a string, but they are going to need at some point the use of two other very useful string functions, which are len and trim. If we take our stock data file, we can see why this becomes a problem. Let's insert a column here. Now the item references are fairly easy to work with. They are the first three letters in text, and then the next 5 characters are numbers. So if I wanted to separate these two into separate sections, so let's insert another column. So we could have reference A and reference B. Then theoretically, I could take the first 3 characters from the left-hand side and the first 5 characters from the right-hand side. And already that doesn't look right. Let's just replicate the formula down. And we can see the left-hand side does seem to be working fine. It's taking the first 3 characters and they're all letters, so that's working great. The right-hand side is not working great, but let's just replicate. And we can see it does appear to work great. Then it doesn't, then it does, then it doesn't, then it does twice, then it doesn't. Now the reason for this is not because the formula is wrong, but because these cells where it doesn't appear to be grabbing the right number of characters, what you'll find is when you drop data from another data source into Excel, you sometimes end up with trailing spaces. And that's what's happening here. If we get into the cell, you can see there's actually 2 spaces at the end of this item reference. So those 2 spaces count as the first 2 characters, and then it takes the next 3, which is why we end up with 003 and then apparently nothing else. Now in order to negate that, we bring in the trim function. So let's insert another column and carry out a trim. This is quite a useful tool to do on all imported data that you then want to subsequently manipulate. So we say equals trim, open brackets. There are only one parameter value to be required here, and that's the text value. So let's take that cell there and then replicate. Now to appearances, that doesn't look any different, but if we now change the reference on this right, we're looking at the trim value, then you'll find we actually get 5 characters because it's stripping away any leading or trailing spaces, leaving the actual text value. It won't take away spaces between words, so that's great. It's just a trailing spaces at the beginning or the end. And then when we're using our right, we're then working on the trimmed value. So let's replicate that to the bottom to make sure it still pulls out 5 actual characters from the item ref. So that's the trim function. That's the first useful function that we can use in conjunction with the right function. Now we could do it without the extra column that we've done here. What we could do instead of doing B2 is go back to being A2, but actually embed the trim function within the right one. So we say, let's take A2, but trim it, so remove any trailing spaces. And then we'll have the 5 characters from the right-hand side. Replicate down, that's working. I now no longer need column B, so I can delete that because the trim is actually being done as part of the right function, so embedded within the right function. The chances are that you will only need the trim function on data that you've either copied and pasted in from somewhere else or downloaded from another application. Now the other useful function to be used with the left and right is the len function. What the len function does is tell us how many characters there are in a string. So if we move across within this file, the stock data file, to the item image, what I'm looking to do here is to get the image name but without the extension, so without the .jpg. Now I can't use right because that will only give me characters on the right hand side. I can use left, but each of the names are a different length. So I would need to figure that out first. So let's insert another column to look at our work in action. Call this length. So to work out how many characters there are in the item image name, I can say equals len, open brackets. Another nice easy function in that it only takes one parameter, which is the text string. And I get told there are 14 characters in there. Now it is worth, just from habit now, embedding the trim function within there just in case any of the image names have spaces at the end or the beginning. So we still have 14 on the fishing mug. Let's replicate that down, and we then get the actual number of characters within each of the item images. If I insert another column, image name, how I can then make use of that is I can say, let's use the left function on that text string. How do I know how many characters I want? Well, I actually want the number of characters that there are, that cell there, but take away the 4 characters for the G, the P, the J, and the full stop. So that way, we're actually dynamically calculating the number of characters that we would like to be extracted. Return, and you see it then says fishing mug. If I replicate that down, we should only be pulling out the name of the image without its file extension. And that appears to work down our list. Now, obviously, a bit like we did with the trim, we could embed the left function inside here. So instead of having H2, we'd say len of G2 minus the 4, and then return. And we get the same result of fishing mug. So it's left of G2, this is our text string. How many characters? Well, we take the len function of our text string and take away 4 to effectively discount the last 4 characters. And if we replicate that, we then have no need for this column here, because all the work is being done by that one function. So using the len function and the trim function together, we can improve the ability of our left and right functions to extract the actual data that we require.